Yes.
How are the 9 defendants involved, and what evidence is against them?
Well, the 9 defendants all participated in beating John Chamberlain to death by hitting, kicking, sodomizing with foreign objects the victim until he was dead. I mean, he had I think the evidence was that and this took place over some time period, anywhere from 20 minutes to maybe 50 or so. And it's hard to tell exactly what that time period was, but he was beaten by waves of inmates, and that was in some manner supervised or allowed by at least one of the shot callers. And in fact, the one who said that he was told that of the charges that John Chamberlain was in for either child molestation or possession of. I think he said he was in for child molestation. So, you know, I mean, they're charged with first-degree murder. I mean, you know, to intentionally inflict pain for the purpose of punishment or some other you know, improper purpose or revenge or whatever it might be, just to inflict pain until somebody's dead is torture. So, and that's first degree. So this is torture murder on the part of all 9 of these people. By the way, if any other person were to become involved as an aider and abettor or an instigator in such a crime, that would be first degree murder too.
Tony, does this report create a solid civil case for anyone, just a slam dunk civil case to come in and raise the tax dollars here?
Well, I think the civil case with respect to John Chamberlain has been settled, and other than that, you know, I'd have to defer that question maybe to the county council or whoever other attorneys might be looking at.
To an extent, the Sheriff's Department made the decision that the department should investigate the homicide. Who made that decision, that call? Who was the shot caller there?
To what extent does reform?
Well, let me try to answer that question. Let me try to answer that question, because I can tell you that the answer to that question is, you know, I don't really know for sure, you know, who made that decision and how it was made. And part of the reason for this grand jury to be sworn in is to try to answer the question as to whether or not somebody made that decision as a cover-up or as some kind of, you know, to cover up the evidence or to try to prevent the Sheriff's Department from getting a black eye or something like that. Was it some sort of intentional decision like that? So we looked into that, I think, very thoroughly, as much as we could at least. And what we find, or what the evidence really reveals, is that the sheriff's sergeant, who's in charge of homicide investigations, was the first person who made any call about that, called our district attorney investigator supervisor, who's in charge of that rollout team to investigate these things, and basically said, you know, you want to send, we already have 15 investigators here working on this. If you want to send 3 or 4 people out to shadow or monitor what we're doing, you know, you're invited. That kind of language. That's never happened. That's not how the district attorney's office investigates cases. And so the response was that no, when we investigate, we lead the investigation. So if you want us to do that, that's what we'll do. And then that dialogue continued up the ladders until finally somebody in a higher level in the Sheriff's Department said, no, this comes from the sheriff, and this is how we're going to do it. So, you know.
Was that Lacy at the time, the sheriff? When you said that comes from the sheriff?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
When you said, when they said that comes from the sheriff, that they were going to investigate the homicide?
Somebody at the higher level, one of the captains or assistants to the sheriff said, this comes from the highest level, I believe was the language, and it's not going to change. So that was a complete violation of the investigative protocol, and the question was why. And pretty much what we're able to prove beyond any question is that the protocol was violated, that the sheriff's administrators had information as to what the protocol was, but the reason that it was violated is we don't have evidence.
Was Galiski asked if she made the call? I mean, it's hard to believe that you couldn't find out how high it went and who said we're going to do it. I mean, it started with the sergeant, just went up the chain, and you couldn't pinpoint who had the ultimate say in that department.
Well, like one of the grand jurors said to one of the sheriff's administrators, it seems that when we talk to the people of lower rank, all of the fingers are pointing up, and now when we talk to you, they're all pointing down.
Well, when you got the statement that this comes from a higher level and it's not going to change, who was the sheriff at that time, or the acting sheriff?
Sheriff was Mike Corona at that time.
It appears that you all really weren't interested in finding out who made the call. It was,
I'm sorry.
Well,
did you say it appears we weren't interested in who made the call?
Well, I mean, it's like, well, the sergeant said this, it went up the ladder, then it went down, we don't know who made the call. It seems like, that there wasn't maybe a deep interest in finding out who made the call.
That question, the connotation of that question is astounding to me, frankly. It's hard for me to know how to deal with it. It's basically an assertion by you that I wasn't particularly interested in finding out what happened. And we put very substantial resources into it for the purpose of finding out what happened, who made the call, why it was made. We dragged people into the grand jury. They came in with redacted documents. We went to court over and over again to get the documents that we needed to get the evidence that we needed to have, and we did the very best job we could to find out what we could find out. All I can tell you is that no matter how hard you investigate, you can't always get what you expected to get. I guess that's one thing about investigations is that you have to at some point accept the results of the investigation.
Tony, what exactly did Mike Corona contribute to the grand jury's efforts?
What did Mike Corona
But
contribute?
did Mike Corona specifically personally contribute to the grand jury's efforts to get to the truth?
You can look at the transcript. Mike Corona took the fifth. I mean, you just go from there.
Hey, Tony, just to make sure that, I understand this correctly, if 6 months from now, those deputies are still employed, theoretically, you could go to the grand jury and ask them to take action against Sheriff Anderson for not fulfilling his duty, for not performing his duty?
Well, I don't know that. I think that we would be able to take action against the individual deputies who didn't fulfill their duty.
Oh, okay. But not necessarily against the sheriff.
Oh, I wouldn't think so. I mean, that would be hard to say that by not firing somebody that he was wantonly disregarded the discharge of his duties.
How many deputies
Yes,
are